I would like to start our conversation with the topic of mental health and maybe specifically about men's mental health, since we're both interested in it. Um, Let me just say that why do you think that so many men today find so much hardship around the concept of mental health? The ability to connect, the ability to feel appreciated, let's say.
Yeah. So I would say, I think historically, that's always been the case. There's always been the dynamics, at home, at your work, and I think it's carried over to the modern man. The lack of, I would say, the lack of meaning and the lack of connection with one another, especially now with how social media is and as cliched it is, how fast and how easy it is to connect with anything in the world. You can learn about anything going on in the news, anything in terms of pop culture, movies, shows, everything. And I think the modern man is I think alone. They're very lonely with their own thoughts and what to do with how they feel. And I think society has not done their part, I think, in terms of building up your fellow man to be prepared to take on the world, to love one another, to be empathetic with one another, to take opposing viewpoints and not lash out in an emotional way, in an impulsive way. I think I feel a lot of sadness for fellow man because they are very angry. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of emotions that they don't know how to feel. And I think, dating back to when I first got the thoughts or inclinations about starting anything in social media, this was, I would say, back in 2019. I was in university, I was in business school, and I remember going in between lectures and I was talking to a friend. I was like, I really have this idea that I want to connect with men, with people that, deal with the similar things that maybe I'm dealing with, and, they thought it was a great idea. They said, you should do that. And this was back in 2019. So this was very early on. I think TikTok had just started, like barely just started. And
Right.
funny enough, this was right before the big explosion of, Andrew Tate and all those different content creators. And, he's still around, but at the time it was massive. And when I think back and I go, why was that vacuum filled with content creators like himself? That for me, in my opinion, I just do not think him as a person or his content really is productive conversations for men. But there's a reason he exploded, because there is a vacuum in the modern man. The people and creators preying on emotions of fellow men who are just, I think at the core level, just trying to understand themselves. And for me, my content, that's my goal. I want to take ideas in philosophy and books and quotes, and I want to spark some interest and curiosity with one another. I look back to, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I've read that book about 3 times now.
Same.
And it is a wonderful book. But the biggest thing is just knowing how a man who was a Roman emperor, he had everything he ever wanted, wealth, women, power. And yet when you look at his writings, they were very lonely. They were very introspective. He wrote about things that were very relatable to even getting up in the morning. The power over your thoughts, not the external world. It's something that is so relatable to today's modern man that I don't think many men, especially younger men, have the barrier to enter into these thoughts. They think of philosophy or books and things like this that are just not very interesting. I think that's where I'm trying to kind of enter into a man's mind, for sure.
And you're doing a great job on it. Since you mentioned Stoicism, many people have the misconception that if a man does manly things, I train in Muay Thai a lot, so I'm around professional athletes as well, all the time. Guys that are huge, ripped, they get punched in the face for money, right? Many people have the misconception that when men do manly things, this is where toxic masculinity arises. But it is actually these people that I've met have the greatest composure, balance, and the ability to control themselves. It is always the men that are not fitting their true masculinity at all that I would say cause problems essentially. Since you mentioned Stoicism, where do you think the line falls between Stoicism and emotional suppression?
I would say Stoicism in at its core, I think, especially with content creators and how the ideas of Stoicism have been through social media, I think have been kind of very different than what the books potentially say, with Marcus Aurelius. And I think emotional suppression, I would disagree, would be the takeaway or one of the takeaways from Stoicism. I think at the core of those ideas, at least for me, I look at is you really can only control what you can control. What are the things within you? So your thoughts, how you react to someone, your emotions, those are things within your control. And, when we look at Carl Jung and he talks about the shadow work, he talks about, dealing with the suppressed, the things within you. When you get angry at someone who is arrogant, let's say, why does anger come out? What is that feeling that comes out? Is it a bit of pride within yourself? Or if you have something that you're reacting to is of jealousy or, things like that, you have to look at yourself. What are you oppressing within yourself that you're not allowing yourself?
I love
Yeah.
that. And I just want to give as an example that I've done a lot of years of psychotherapy. At some point, a couple years back, I remember talking to my psychotherapist about how I got very angry at meeting somebody that had values and traits that I didn't appreciate. And she hit me with a saying that basically said that whenever we get angry with somebody, of course, unless he has caused some kind of specific harm to us, it is either because we fear that what we see in him we used to have, we now have, or we will in the future have. And later in my studying, I saw this concept in psychology called projective identification, when you project your own values and thoughts into other people to help you guide in life. So I think it is extremely valuable what you're saying about Stoicism.